Rental is a new drama/thriller film directed and written by Dave Franco as well as Joe Swanberg helping with the writing. It stars Dan Stevens, Alison Brie, Sheila Vaughn, and Jeremy Allen White. The story focuses on two brothers, Charlie and Josh, played by Dan Stevens and Jeremy Allen White, Charlie's wife Michelle, played by Alison Brie, and Sheila Vaughn playing Mina, Charlie's co-worker at a job. They just did something really huge there, and they're trying to celebrate before they have to come back and do their work grind all over again, pretty much. So they rent out like this Airbnb type place to hang out for the weekend. But as they get there, certain things happen and certain things build. And, you know, eventually it just explodes into drama. I was pretty curious to see this film because it is Dave Franco's directorial debut. I've been a fan of his recently as far as an actor goes, so I wanted to see what he could do behind the camera, but also on the page, because he is also a writer on this movie, so I wanted to see what kind of story he'd come up with, you know, because a lot of comedians are taking the route of doing horror movies or horror things, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worst. I guess an example of that would be like when Queen Latifah did like Scream Season 3 at MTV. I'm one of those people that enjoyed like the first two seasons of that show, and it went away for a bit and I was kind of bummed. Then it came back and it sucked. I didn't even finish that season. So I was hoping for sure that Dave Franco would fall on the side of like a Jordan Peele, who, you know, start off with comedy and then go into horror, and it turns out really well for him. That's what I was really hoping with this. I heard some comparisons to a movie called 13 Cameras before I saw this, so I saw that and 14 Cameras before watching this movie, and they're awful. They're really terrible movies, especially 14 Cameras. I think that's definitely worse than 13 Cameras. So when I was going into the rental, I was like, there's no way that it can be like any worse than that, because I think 13 Cameras is one of those movies that, you know, it gets a bad rap from a lot of critics, but there's like horror fans out there that don't particularly care about the quality of the overall movie, just as long as it maybe has like a cool concept or some, you know, freaky things, like basic freaky things in it. So I was just saying, as long as the rental isn't like this, I've heard some comparisons, but it's really just as far as concept goes, and if I'm being honest, the rental has a lot of what I wanted out of 13 Cameras to begin with. And in certain ways that 13 Cameras failed for me, I thought the rental kind of exceeded. I really did have a good time watching this movie. I think Dave Franco did a really good job transitioning into this, because it's not really a horror film. It definitely becomes a horror film much, much later on, and there's certain traces earlier where you can see the horror is starting, just we won't focus on it a whole lot yet. For the majority of this film, it is mostly a drama, like a character study kind of drama, where you're watching these two couples, Dan Stevens and Alison Brie, and Sheila Vaughn and Jeremy Allen White. When the movie starts, you get to know them like with a few basic details, which I guess if I was to have a complaint with this movie, I wish maybe they spent a little bit more time with us getting to live with these characters a bit before they decided to go to this Airbnb type place. But you still get those like seeds of like what's to come, like those little hints that they drop earlier on in the screenplay about where certain plot lines are going to go and what's going to happen. And a lot of this movie had me fascinated because of seeing how these characters start off, and because of the writing, where they're going to end up and how they're going to react when certain things happen. When certain things were starting to fall into place and you were seeing why they were kind of set up to begin with, seeing where it went, there was a little bit of satisfaction for me as far as like screenwriting goes. Like how you see how these relationships start out and then you see like how they kind of act as they go on. There's this one character who thinks she's being racially discriminated against by the owner of this house that they're going to, played by Toby Huss, who, by the way, is like a little bit fun in this movie. Like he's supposed to be like this sleazy kind of guy, like you're not really sure if he's a racist or a bad guy, but you know, every time he came on screen there was just like this wisp. I don't I have no idea how to properly describe it, but he was kind of a joy to see come onto the screen. But you do have that kind of drama with the character Mina, where she's like, I put in a request for this place and it got denied, but you know, this white guy Dan Stevens puts in a request and it gets accepted by this man Toby Huss. So I don't know, have you established that kind of drama before? And once you see where that kind of goes and how it's escalating their story and how it continues to unfold, I thought they did a really great job with the writing in that sense, especially when the drama does kind of start to escalate. It helps also that the actors are able to pull this off very well. You know, you have a great cast here. Dan Stevens is particularly very good in this movie. Obviously, he's been thriving lately, which is a great thing to see, but also Alison Brie, Dave Franco's wife, some people may call nepotism, which it kind of is, but you know, she's really great in this movie, so it doesn't really matter all that much to me if she's in it just because she's married to the dude. Who cares? She's really great in this, and her performance ranges as far as like she starts off one way and then you see her in other ways as the movie goes on that I won't spoil, but you know, she pulls off every layer of her emotion very well. Jeremy Allen White was also really good in this movie. I'm not familiar with the guy. I know my sister and my dad are trying to get me to watch Shameless, and I know he's on that. Maybe I will someday, but he's really good in this movie too. When the movie opens up, they do kind of establish that he's had a previous rough patch, but in this new relationship with Charlie's coworker Mina, you know, he's in a really better place than he was. So you already kind of see like, oh, this is probably not going to go very well as the movie goes on. And once again, just as far as the writing goes, how they use these different character types to escalate their situation and keep it moving, I thought they did a really great job with that. And at first, he did something near like the end of the second act-ish where I was like, this almost seems like it's coming out of nowhere. But as I thought about it a bit more, I was like, well, actually, no, they have been kind of building on this for a while. You know, it all kind of makes sense. It's an interesting kind of, to reflect on some of these characters as it goes on as a character study. You're able to see like, okay, I understand what's going on here. Everything is piecing together very well. So I really do have to give it up for Dave Franco, because for a debut, this is really, really solid directing and really solid writing. You know, later on, when it does have to become a slasher film, which I will warn you right up front, it's not a slasher film for the majority. It's really just like the last 15 minutes or so. So if you're expecting a slasher movie going in, it's really not. You know, it is mostly a drama that eventually builds into a slasher film. They eventually find themselves in one, which I still really like to see. You know, I like that Dave Franco and Joe Swanberg were able to take such a ballsy approach to an idea that could seem stale, just people go on a vacation, and then a slasher comes around. They're able to infuse that drama and get you to care about these characters even more beforehand. The thrills honestly really do work. There's like a practical effect thing that they do where I was like, ooh, like I was honestly kind of shocked, like, oh my gosh, you know, that looks really good as far as a practical effect goes. You're probably gonna know what it is when you see the movie, because it's one of those things that's like right in front of your face, like, oh, yeah, that looked pretty good and pretty convincing. There's no moments where there's false jump scares or anything like that. Like there's a moment earlier on where a guy's like picking at a lock and the music is kind of building up, and then someone taps on his shoulder and, you know, music goes away, but it's not really treated as like a jump scare because you can see the person coming up in the background while the music is coming up. So I didn't really see that as really like a false jump, like a intended scare. I saw it as just like a, you know, that was just their idea on how they edit the scene, and I was fine with that. And every other time it seems like they're actually trying to put you in suspense, which I thought they were able to do very well. There's a moment of dark comedy too that I don't really want to spoil because it's kind of a big part of the movie, but even, you know, that had me laughing, and some people could say like that's such a jarring tonal shift. But once you see like what the scene is edited alongside with, like, you know, like these people over here while this character is doing this, it's like, okay, there's like an extra layer of suspense to this that is really drawing me in as well. I don't think this movie's perfect though. I already mentioned before, I think they could have spent a little bit more time in the beginning to get you really living with these characters, because it does kind of go by pretty quickly. It's only like an hour and 28 minutes, which is pretty good running time for this kind of movie. But I do think maybe they could have gone on a little longer, and I wouldn't have minded at all just for that beginning part. There's also something they do with a dog that I wasn't a big fan of how they handled that. They open up the movie establishing like this dog is really cute and adorable, but it's important, and eventually the inevitable does happen, and you as an audience member like, oh no, you know, that's really bad. But then as the movie starts to come to a close and you're wondering what happened to the dog, they tell you and they close that plot thread, and you're like, oh, okay, that wasn't bad at all. But how, and it just kind of, it starts to make you question like, wait, you know, but how, where, once you see the movie, I think you guys will understand where I'm trying to get at, that it's just a little confusing as far as how they decided to treat it. Now, honestly, they could have cut it out and it probably wouldn't have mattered all that much, or just come up with a better ending for it. That could have worked too. There's like this one small minor scene with an electromagnetic lock, and the way it's kind of edited, it felt a little awkward. It's kind of hard to describe, but it felt like they're queuing up for a joke, like a joke is going to come in, like a really dry kind of sense of humor, but then a joke never came. You know, but, you know, it was just edited really awkwardly to make me think a joke was coming. And I think maybe they could have done a little better job of it if it was supposed to actually be kind of serious. And if it was that easy to get into it, how come they had to spend a little bit of time just that was one of those things where it was just kind of obvious delaying of tension. My final issue with this movie is just the way they decide to like properly wrap it up. It's missing just a message that ultimately ties the whole movie together and is like, okay, I understand why everything happened in the plot this way. It's not something where everything starts to fall apart afterwards. It's not anything like that. It just felt like they wanted this plot point in the movie and they wanted this to be like the key focus of their ending, but it almost kind of feels like they're shifting, like for a movie that was solely just kind of like a character study, now it seems like they actually have something they want to say about this thing that's creepy and really nasty. It just seems like they were missing like maybe a few lines of dialogue or maybe like a few shots that really ties everything together, you know? And once again, it's kind of hard to really explain it without spoiling, and I don't really want to because this movie, I feel like, has been really well guarded for the most part. But overall, I enjoyed The Rental. I hope that Dave Franco really is able to spread his wings more as a writer and director in the future, because I think he really does show some promise behind the camera here, and I think he is able to create something really spectacular. And this was a pretty good start. A solid movie is better than a horrible directorial debut, so props to you, Dave Franco. I look forward to your future in directing and writing. Maybe with Joe Swanberg again, I don't know. I'm gonna give The Rental a B. The cast is really great here, the writing is really strong, the directing is good from Dave Franco. It's an overall solid thrill ride that is mostly a drama until the end, but everything kind of ties together really well. It has a couple issues, I think, but for the most part, I was able to enjoy myself watching this. I would say for sure that this is a good rental. A lot of the people making that joke, just like as far as like, this is a bad movie, you should just rent it. You know, it's kind of awkward since the only way you can watch movies right now is renting. So actually it's kind of a compliment to the movie. Like, this movie is not very good, you should rent it. And you're like, well, yeah, I'm home anyways, so I will rent it. It's the only way I can watch it. I don't have a drive-in theater near me, so yeah. Jerk. But if you've seen The Rental, leave in the comments below what you thought of it, and as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.